My name is Jennifer Webb McCrae, and if you are from Cumberland County, I am your Cumberland County Prosecutor. We're here today with another episode of Coping with COVID, which is a series we've been doing during the COVID pandemic to help keep our stakeholders and our viewers aware of the services that are still available in Cumberland County to help people remain healthy, safe, and productive during the pandemic. I'm excited today because we're going to be talking about overcoming child sexual abuse. And that's a very important topic, and it's very timely because April is Sexual Abuse Awareness Month. And we know that the pandemic has caused us to shelter in place, which is important for our safety to keep safe from COVID. But sheltering in place also makes it hard sometimes to identify sexual abuse or child abuse. So we thought that if we talked about this topic, we would help our listeners be attuned to what is abuse and what is child sexual abuse in our community. I'm pleased today to have with us two employees that work for SERV, which is SERV stands for Services Empowering the Rights of Victims. And they work closely with our Child Advocacy Center. So I'm going to first introduce to you Jackie Hurwitz. She is a veteran of our Coping with COVID series because she was here to talk to us about how the pandemic might affect children and how we can talk to our children about it. So I'm really happy to have you here today. If you don't mind, I'm going to call you Jackie, and I want you to call me Jennifer. But can you tell us a little bit about what you do at SERV, and then also what you do at the Child Advocacy Center?
Okay, so I am a bilingual counselor, meaning that we provide services in both Spanish and English. For SERV, and specifically at the Child Advocacy Center, I work as the primary clinician or therapist. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm also a registered play therapist and certified in providing trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy.
Thank you, and welcome today. We also have with us Lizette Hernandez, another employee of SERV who is connected to our Child Advocacy Center. Would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Hi, my name is Lizette Hernandez again. I am the bilingual child advocate for the Child Advocacy Center. I have my bachelor's of science in social work, and I am trained to provide advocacy and support to our children and families that require assistance at the CAC.
Wonderful. And as always, and a big help to me, I have with us today Matthew Rudd. He is the Prosecutor's Office Community Justice Coordinator, and he didn't know when he came to our office that he also would be a producer of Coping with COVID, but he certainly has filled that role as well. So Matt is my special agent, and he's here today, and welcome Matt, and he'll be participating with me in the conversation. So I got a question before we start out. Just, we've had the Child Advocacy Center open now for just about 1.5 years. Would either of you like to tell the public what happens at the Child Advocacy Center and what you do there?
Lizette, would you like to take that one?
Okay. So the Child Advocacy Center, it's a friendly place where children can come in, and if they have experienced any type of trauma, they can get help there. Like I said, it's child friendly. Instead of going to a police station where they can get scared or make it more traumatic, the Child Advocacy Center is a place for them to get the help they need with our counselor, Jackie. What I do is I do the screenings for the children and get their information, so I'm able to give it to Jackie so she's able to connect with them and provide the services. I also do community outreach.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about what the screening looks like. What's a child going to see when they go to the Child Advocacy Center? I know the answer to this question, but I want to hear it from you. Explain to them what's there. We got the toys, we got the we got the stuffed animals, we got things to make, children feel comfortable and safe, even when they're dealing with something as difficult as abuse. So why don't you tell them a little bit about what they would see when they would come to the Child Advocacy Center?
So when they come into the Child Advocacy Center, we have a space for them. There's toys, there's chairs where they can sit down. And just kind of, if the parents are waiting while they're getting the help needed, whether it's interviewing by the detectives, there's, like you said, toys for them that we can give them. They get a stuffed animal when they leave. They feel safe because we have the doors locked when they come in. Nobody else can enter but somebody with this has access to it.
And Jackie, since you have the counseling background, can you talk about why that's important?
I think that very often these spaces haven't thought of what the experience is like from a child's point of view. And the best part about the Child Advocacy Center is that is how the services are provided from the child's point of view. What is it like as a child who has experienced trauma, along with family members, to come into a place where they don't feel safe, where they are scared, and what can we do to best support them? How can we make them feel safe? How can we address the environment? So that goes from having toys, to the way the rooms are set up, to lighting, to the way the place smells, and also the people who work there, all of us, right? How are we going to affect that environment and make the family and children feel safe? And so as far as a therapy point of view, we have a playroom for younger children. So if we are talking about young children who've experienced trauma, they very often don't have the vocabulary, the language skills, or the words to talk about what happened to them, or to express and work through the trauma of what happened to them. So we have the playroom, which has the toys, and very often as therapists, what we say is that play is the language of young children. And if we think of play as the language of young children, then the toys are the words.
Oh.
So, playroom, we have toys to express as much as possible, or anything that the children could possibly want to express within that playroom. And so that's the kind of thing. It's not a traditional therapy space, right, where you have a chair, when we think of Freud sitting. We have a space that is specifically set up for young children and their needs after having experienced trauma.
Right. So and I'll just share with our viewers that from the legal perspective, the reason it was so important to me to launch the Child Advocacy Center and finally have that in Cumberland County is that everything about the legal part of interviewing children tell us that children are susceptible to, things that adults might not be. For instance, if a detective is wearing a gun and looking super imposing, and interviewing in a way where they're, leading a child one way or another, then children are more susceptible to being led. So all of the detectives that would interview a child who was a victim of abuse or sexual abuse have all been through the Finding Words training, which is a evidence-based training tool that trains police officers not to ask questions that lead to certain answers, to ask open-ended questions which permit children to give the information in the vocabulary that they are used to giving information in. In addition to that, when detectives from this office or from the local police departments interview the children, they don't have their firearms on them, which takes a layer of that authority away, which then will make children more comfortable to open up to them. Finally, at the Child Advocacy Center, in the interview rooms, the rooms that are specifically reserved for child interviews, there are what we call anatomically correct dolls. And those dolls are used so that children can explain, in terms of sexual abuse specifically, the parts of a body that they are aware of, and the names that they use to describe those parts of the body. So we're not asking them or telling them what to call those parts. We are asking them, and then they're doing the interview with the information that the child provides. The child can touch the area where they're describing, not the detectives leading them. And that's all very important from the perspective of justice, because we don't want to have false, false information conveyed based on the way we try to tease and pull it out of an individual. We want them to tell us the truth based on their knowledge base and what they know. There's been cases across the country before finding words, before we had these tools that would allow a child to explain in their own vocabulary, where there were concerns about law enforcement leading children to conclusions versus getting the truth from them. And that's why I'm proud to say that the Cumberland County Prosecutor's Office, as well as our state, is very committed to making sure that we have accredited, and we're working on our accreditation at this time, child advocacy centers in every community. And that's what the Child Advocacy Center is about from a legal perspective. Finally, one more thing. At the Child Advocacy Center, we actually have a courtroom, a mock courtroom set up, so that if we have children who are going to be witnesses in court, that their first experience with what the courtroom will look like, what the judge's role is, what the prosecutor will do, what the defense attorney will do, will not be in an actual courtroom. We will use that mock courtroom to prepare the child for that experience. We all know as professionals, we could imagine how traumatic it could be for a child to have to walk in a room and be stared at by a judge, and be stared at by 12 jurors, and be stared at by the defendant, and not know what to expect when they walk in that room. So we work really, really hard to make sure that we are not re-traumatizing our victims by not preparing them for the experiences that they will experience in the criminal justice system. So that's a little bit about the Child Advocacy Center. Now I want to get into probably what is the hard topic that we have to talk about today, and that's child abuse, and specifically child sexual abuse. So I'm going to start with you, Jackie, to ask a question, like what might be a sign that a child might exhibit? What are the kinds of signs that a child might exhibit if they were a victim of child sexual abuse?
Okay, so some of the things that we educate parents about are physical signs versus behavioral signs. So some of the physical signs would be bruising, bleeding, swelling in the genital area. We're talking about, and these things are difficult to hear, difficulty walking, sitting. We're talking about frequent urinary tract infections or yeast infections, and pain, itching, or burning in the genital area. So those are explicit physical signs, but those aren't always the case, right? Sometimes what we need to be looking for are more behavioral signs. So when we're talking about behavioral signs, it's changes from whatever behavior is the norm for that particular child. So we may be talking about things like changes in bathing. So it could be not wanting to bathe at all, or being resistant to bathing, or bathing a lot, really wanting to shower and bathe often, right? So it could be either way. We're talking about, especially in adolescent victims, maybe suicidal thoughts. When we're thinking about our younger victims, perhaps less verbal, we're talking about maybe some regressive behaviors like sucking, thumb sucking, wanting to be closer to the parent. We're talking about nightmares, bedwetting, right? So it looks different depending on the age, but it also is really referring to what is the norm of that behavior for the child.
So one of the experiences that I've had, during my career in criminal justice is, let's break it down a little bit with younger children. Could it possibly be them being aware of things that aren't necessarily appropriate for younger children to know?
Yes, and yes. So that could be either them verbally expressing things, sexual things, or having that is inappropriate for their age, right? Or it could be acting out sexually in a way that's not appropriate for their age, because there is normal developmental sexual behaviors. But when we talk about children who've experienced sexual abuse, they tend to be more explicit and things that they would not have been exposed to unless there was abuse.
So if a child started talking about something, like a younger child, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, about, sexually explicit acts that the parent, knows the child wasn't exposed to by them, that might be the type of thing that, you have to do some more explanation to see how they know that behavior or are aware of that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And this is what is hard for parents, right? Because it's hard to think of your child having had this experience. So how do parents maintain a sense of being grounded, of being calm, while perhaps having to ask some more exploratory questions of their child, right? So some of the things that we will talk to parents about is, think about when and where you're going to talk about it, right? So it's not something you want to dive into immediately. Look at the environment. Where are you? Is it a safe place? Is it a calm place? Who else is around before you ask any follow-up questions? So
Right.
you're going to look at the environment, try and see if it's a safe and calm place. And then you're also going to watch your tone, because as a parent, that must be the hardest thing, right? You want to know everything right here and now. So watch your tone. And so it's not going to, I'm thinking that it's not even a serious tone. It's more of a casual tone, right? Because a serious tone is going to indicate to the child something's up.
Right. And I could imagine that, there's shame as well.
Yes.
So that's why it's so important that the tone be appropriate and right, so that you have to be careful not to make the child feel like the child's done something wrong.
Right. So you don't want to assign blame or use language that the child can construe as assigning blame, and also no shameful language.
Right.
So this is a tough thing to keep in mind when you're exploring this issue with your children, right?
Right. So let's talk about what can parents do? Like, I mean, I know that, from being a mom I was a mom by 28, right? But I also was in the field of criminal justice. So I saw a lot of bad things. And that made me shelter my child in a way that I don't know that I would have had I not seen the possibility of kind of the worst behavior happen to children. But I think it's really important for two things: for parents to be aware and empowered with information to keep their children safe, and also for parents to know how to give their children agency, meaning that they understand, to empower your children to understand that their body is their own body, that they don't have to be put in positions where they're uncomfortable, that if someone threatens, don't tell your mommy or daddy, that you always can feel comfortable telling your mommy and daddy, those kind of things. What's the age that you think is most appropriate to start talking about agency and those kind of conversations with your child?
So Lizette and I were actually talking about this earlier, and perhaps Lizette could add when I'm done with my little thing over here. I think you start right from the beginning, right? Even if it's just about you as a caregiver, as a parent, grandparent, whoever is looking daycare, you start right from the beginning. So, so that the child knows that this is their body. Now, sometimes, even when you're changing a diaper, right, you say, is it okay if I change your diaper? Like, you're going to change that diaper, but it's about getting into the habit of talking to the child, acknowledging that this is the child's body. When you're talking about, we need to get changed or dressed for the day. Can I help you put on your clothes, right? So that's you as a parent getting used to this language, because as time goes on, it's going to be talks about not having to hug or kiss family members that they don't want to. I don't know if you would like to talk about this a little bit, Lizette, because Lizette is in the process of even she does it with our clients, but she also has young children.
Oh, okay.
That she talks to about this.
I do. Professionally, I don't know, Jackie, if you agree, like you said in the beginning, my son is 3 years old. No, I'm sorry, he's 4. He's going to be 5 in July. And I have a daughter that's 2 years old. I started talking to him about consent, about obviously in their language, right? Depending how old they are. My son, I always ask, is it okay if I change you? Is it okay if I help you change? Even bathing time, he apparently starts to feel kind of embarrassed or something's going on where he doesn't want mom's changing him or bathing him. He prefers dad to help him if he needs to, and he wants to learn to do it himself, which is something that I encourage as well. You know, when I was potty training him, you know, learn to clean yourself. It's okay to ask for help. And if you need the help, I will be there or your dad will be there. But I always encourage him to do it himself. And that will give him a sense of consent as well. When I say consent, I always ask questions before I do something. Is it okay if I help? When we go out or he sees somebody, you know, I always tell him you have to have good manners, say hello. But I never force him to hug or kiss anybody if he doesn't want to. But just saying hello is fine for me, and he knows that, and he will do that. If he doesn't feel comfortable kissing somebody or, you know, doing something he doesn't want to, he won't do it. So he loves his grandparents, so he always kisses and hugs him, give him their blessings before he leaves. But that's it. I don't see him do that with anybody else. So that tells me that he kind of understands already what is consent and what's okay for him and what's comfortable for him to do and not to do. With his sister, my daughter walks already. So when he's in the bathroom, he says, "Mommy, can you close the door? I don't want Camilla to go in there." And I'm like, "Sure, I will." So he's already, I can see that he knows what makes him comfortable and what doesn't. Yeah.
So listening to his own body, right? So this is important. Very often we expect children to override their own instincts, their own what messages that their body tells them. So the fact that he knows this doesn't feel comfortable, I want some privacy, and he's okay asking for it.
Yeah.
Because what we need for children as they get older through the course of their life is to acknowledge this person, I mean, it's just looking at me funny and it doesn't feel right.
Right.
Right? Trust their gut. This doesn't feel right.
Right.
So the person hasn't said anything or done anything yet. But there are ways if we teach children to listen to their bodies, trust their bodies, and then to act in a way to keep themselves safe. Right? And that goes also a little bit further in terms of empowering children to say no. Very often there are family values or family ways of being where they say, you're not allowed to say no to me, I'm your parent, right? But actually what we want children to learn is that they can say no. Now, sometimes in families, okay, you can say no, you really don't feel like doing the dishes, and then we'll have to discuss it, and you may end up having to do the dishes. But when it is possible, you want children to be empowered to say no, to experience what it's like to say no, right? And acknowledge that this is their wants and needs. Because you don't want the first time that a child needs to practice this no and feel empowered in saying that no is in a situation where they don't feel safe, when they're scared. You want that practice to start at home. And it may be just saying no to siblings, right?
Yes.
Use my stuff. You're taking my clothes. No, I don't like. So it's about setting boundaries, really. So how do you practice that in the home?
Yeah. I know with my, I have grandchildren because I have stepchildren. My 23-year-old is not, he doesn't have any kids yet. He's sort of a baby himself still. So I'm glad about that. But my 30-year-old stepdaughter is a wonderful parent. So I am blessed with 2 stepchildren and step grandchildren, but they're my babies. They're my grandbabies.
Yeah.
And they are 6 and 5. So we talk a lot about, like, I share with them about secrets. And I always say, you know, do you know what a secret is? And they'll say, yeah, I know what a secret is. And I'm like, you never keep secrets from mommy and daddy. Not even secrets that grandma, says. Mommy, you tell mommy and daddy everything. And trying to get them to understand that, no one has the right to make you keep a secret from your parents, because so often, and unfortunately, in the realm of criminal justice and in the realm of child sexual abuse, it's not a stranger. It's someone that they have contact with, a family member, an older, like cousin, an older sibling sometimes. So that you have to kind of share with them that, if somebody tells you to keep a secret from mommy and daddy, you don't do that. You can tell your mommy and daddy anything. And that seems to be an easier thing for them to understand than like good people and bad people. We talk to them about, like, you're afraid, I'll say to them, you can't go outside by yourself. Somebody might snatch you. They think of the person who's going to snatch them as this scary looking person, not somebody who's like, do you want ice cream? Or here's a piece of candy.
Yeah.
So that's a harder concept, it seems, but they seem to get the secret concept.
So sometimes when we talk about secrets, I try and flush it out a little bit more, especially as children get older. So I say there are 2 types of secrets.
Okay, I like that.
Right? There's a secret that you keep for a little bit that's going to come out. Right? Like if you buy somebody a Christmas present, it's a secret. But guess what? On Christmas, they're going to find out. We're planning a party for dad. It's a surprise party. We have a secret, but the day of the party, it's going to come out. What we don't want are secrets that you have to keep forever. Forever secrets.
That's good.
Don't ever tell your mom and dad about this. And it's very often followed by a threat, right?
Right.
So that's a forever secret. So there's these 2 types of secrets, because secrets can be fun if you have like a gift that you're not telling, or you're working on a drawing that you're going to give to mom on Valentine's Day.
Right.
I've also added another piece, which has been a kind of another layer in the same description, which is there are things that are private. And it kind of goes back to the boundaries point that you were making a few moments ago, Jackie, where there are things that are private, like mom and dad have times that are private from you, right? And so being able to distinguish the boundaries that exist, that the private is not the same thing as secret.
Yes.
Which is not the same thing as a short secret versus a bad secret, which would be the one that you have to keep forever. And I think that also gets back to when we talk about our genitalia or what is private to us, it also helps establish some of that agency that you were talking about as well. So I remember this one time when my daughters came and they said, "Can we see your privates?" And I said, "No, they're mine. They're not yours. No, you cannot." They said, "Well, you see ours." And I said, "There's only 2 times that happens. When you need help and I'm here to help you, then it's appropriate for me to help you with what you have needs. Or when someone is checking you like a doctor, that is again when you need help. And that's really the only kind of time that we're talking about sharing our privates." And so then helping them understand that boundaries have gates in them, and you can open the boundary when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
When things are private, you get to keep them to yourself, and that you don't have to share them, but you can choose when is appropriate times to share them.
Yeah.
I know that with my son when he was little, he would always want to come in the bathroom with me. And anybody who's a mom, I don't know, Matthew, if this happens to daddies too, but once you become a mom, you don't have privacy. They want to go everywhere with you, especially when they're little. So I would say, mommy's having privacy. Like, can I at least have privacy when I go to the bathroom? And he would stick his little fingers underneath the door, just so like I would touch his fingers while I was having privacy, right? But then he got the concept. So then, you know, on the other side of that, he'd be in the bathroom with maybe 4 years old with the door shut. And I'd be like, what are you doing in there? Are you playing in the winter? And he'd be like, I'm having privacy. So, you know, they do, even though they're little, we can find ways to, number one, give them agency so that they feel that their body is their own and they have some control over what happens to them. And then also to get them to understand these concepts that will, you know, keep them safe. Now I want to kind of switch gears and talk about what is child abuse. And for our viewers, I'm going to prep them to the fact that this is a difficult topic to talk about. And when we talk about what constitutes child abuse, you often have to talk about some explicit things so that parents understand what is actually something they need to report. So I'm preparing our audience for that. But once we discuss the definitions of child sexual abuse specifically, we'll unpack it. So Lizette, if you could tell us, what is the definition of child sexual abuse?
Okay, I'm gonna read the definition. It's, like I said, it's a really hard topic, so please be aware. Child sexual abuse is a form of child abuse that includes sexual activity with a minor. A child cannot consent to any form of sexual activity. Child sexual abuse does not need to include physical contact. Some forms of sexual abuse includes more explicit stuff that I'm gonna read slowly, which is fondling, intercourse with a minor, exposing oneself to a minor, or having the minor expose themselves to oneself. Masturbation is the presence of a minor or forcing the minor to masturbate. And another hard topic would be sex trafficking a minor, or producing, owning, or sharing pornography images or movies of children. So
just so I can unpack some of the legal things there, you talked about the fact that a child cannot consent. So in the state of New Jersey, anyone under the age of 16 cannot consent to participate in a sexual activity. So endangering the welfare of a child is to do something of either, endangering can just be straight abuse, or it could be sexual abuse, debauching the morals of a child. No one can ever say, oh, that child wanted to do something, because a child does not have the mental faculties to appreciate the outcome of their actions in the state of New Jersey if they are under 16 years of age and the person who is the offender is 4 years older than them. So everyone needs to understand that. That is what we call, it can be, even in that context, statutory rape, or it's by statute, a person under the age of 16 cannot consent to anything. Okay, so I think that's really important to understand. The term fondling is kind of a legal term. We mean inappropriately touching a minor is against the law. Everyone needs to understand that. I oftentimes in my career as a defense attorney also heard, I never touched the person. That doesn't matter. You cannot introduce inappropriate sexual, explicitly sexual content, pictures, anything of that nature to a minor. That is against the law. So, you know, if you expose pornography to a minor and let them look at it, that is endangering the welfare of a child. It constitutes a crime. You don't get to say, well, I didn't take the act of touching that person or harming that child and get away with it. So I think that's important for people to understand that minors cannot consent to a sexual act. That's step one. It's very difficult to talk about things like masturbation, but it's never appropriate to participate in that with a person who cannot consent to it. So that is another form of sexual assault, another form of child abuse, another form of sexual child abuse. And we want parents to know that. We want potential offenders to know that. It was something that I talked very openly with my son about as my son was growing up, so that he understood that, you know, in his adolescent mind, certain things are inappropriate and against the law. And oftentimes, one of the most difficult things I think that we have to deal with as criminal justice practitioners is the fact that sometimes we're talking about two teenagers together, but it still is not appropriate and it is still against the law. We sometimes handle that differently based on whether the young person is a juvenile or an adult. Juvenile in our system is under the age of 18, but it still is against the law and it still needs to be addressed. So as we talk about these things, I think it's important to do things like we're doing now, just so that everybody is aware of what is prohibited, what constitutes sexual abuse, and why there's such a need to educate the community so that we protect all children. So what steps should a parent take after he or she finds out their child has been sexually abused or suspects that their child has been sexually abused?
Okay, so generally it is recommended that parents report, but what I always hope parents will do is tell the child that they're going to report. So talk to the child before they do that, because it's going to mean a lot of changes. There are a lot of steps that are going to take place after that. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure that you're not asking the child permission to report, but you do want them to know what's going to happen, right? That you are going to report and this is what's going to happen. You also want to reassure the child about their safety. So when you're talking about reporting, you want to make sure that the perpetrator is not around, and that when that happens, that there is a safe place for the child to be. And then Lizette has some information about the actual reporting.
Well, the first thing is to call 911, or you can also just call the DCMP to make the report.
So for our viewers, DCPMP is the Division of Child Protective Services.
Child Protection and Permanency.
Right, which is previously, and I still refer to it as DIFUS, so that everybody knows what we're talking about.
Yes, I think making that phone call, and like Jackie said, reassuring the child that the first thing to do is make sure that, and let him know that it wasn't his fault, that don't victim blame, that he's not in trouble. We're gonna help you. And these are the steps that we're gonna take to help you. So by calling 911, making that report, explaining what's gonna happen, the police, a police officer is gonna come and ask you questions, and make him aware that you're gonna be there throughout the whole process, and that he's not in trouble, that it's just, just say how you feel and what happened. Other than that, I say just, I think a lot of times we panic, right? It's something hard for a parent. So just being calm, because if we get anxiety or we start panicking, we're gonna pass that on to our child, and he might shut down because, okay, he sees mom's panicking or he sees mom getting alarmed. So he's gonna panic and he might just shut down and not able to talk. So we don't want to do that. We wanna make sure that he's confident, that he's safe, and that we can talk about what happened.
Right.
Can I just ask like you described calling 911 or DCPMP, But what does happen? And even to Jackie's earlier point about when and where, right? So I think there's probably often two responses. One is panic and just do something right now, right away. And then the other is, I'm not going to do anything because I don't know what to do and I'm paralyzed, and then become passive in it. So I just, like, if people maybe understood what would happen, then they could take that time to process and then move appropriately. That's going to be less traumatizing.
So
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
From our law perspective, why it was so important to get that Child Advocacy Center is what we want to happen is for the child to be met at the Child Advocacy Center and not have to walk into a police station. So that was, like, from my perspective, prosecutor perspective, super important, because now if a child is under the age of 13, they're never going to go to the police station. They're going to go to the Child Advocacy Center, where we have wonderful people like Lizette Hernandez who are going to be able to walk them through the process. And we have wonderful people like Jackie Hurwitz who are going to help them walk through the therapy process. But the detectives would meet them there at the Child Advocacy Center. And that's where the child-friendly interview that we talked about with Finding Words would take place.
Makes sense. So I mean, that should happen sooner than later, right? So if you find out something at 11:30 at night, you may want to take the night. Is that right? Or should you call right away? Like, where? I guess
you can call anytime. Obviously, our police departments are 24/7 operations. There are, obviously considerations about a young child being up in the middle of the night giving an interview. So sometimes those things are actually scheduled. But, and maybe Jackie, you can speak to this. I'm thinking with my mommy hat. I'm not thinking with my prosecutor hat right now. I think it's really, really important that you, as a parent, make sure your child is safe.
Yeah.
Safe from the perpetrator, feel safe as they're going through this traumatic experience. So we regularly consult with a non-offending parent, which a lot of times it's both of them, as to what's best for their child, because everybody is different. But that is a consideration that a parent should make in terms of when the child would be interviewed about the offending, act that occurred to them.
Right. And you're also going to consider, is the offending person residing in the home with the child? Because that would make a big difference.
Right.
If the child is disclosing something that happened in the past and is no longer exposed to danger, then you may wait till the morning, right? As a parent, you may decide to do that. But if you're talking about this person's coming home from work in an hour,
right,
do something now.
Right.
They need to talk about restraining orders and all those other things and get some police intervention in that moment.
Right away.
Yeah.
So here's a good place to just quickly talk about, like, the supervision part of, where we talked about the fact that, a parent has to make those decisions. It's on the fly sometimes. Whereas if it's an immediate situation, the offender's coming back, you might have to do something right away. If it's something that had happened in the past, which we see happen a lot in this area, because even, adults have to process trauma. So adults don't report immediately. So why would we think children would, right? Those things have to be decided as to what's best for your child. But what I want our listeners to know is that parents, you have an obligation to keep your children safe. We expect that when they are victims of sexual violence and sexual abuse, that you are going to take an action that will put your child in a situation where they are protected. And I understand that that's hard, and I understand that that's fact specific, especially in family dynamics. But I want you to know that if you take that step and keep your child at the forefront, meaning I'm going to protect my child above everything else, there are services in our community like SERV that can help you navigate these very difficult situations. A lot of times, just like when we deal with family violence and power structures and who's the money earner in the family, and how, you know, things, family secrets or violence or abuse, how when they come out, it creates very uncertain times. I want you to know that there are very hardworking people in our community like Lizette, like Jackie, who will help navigate families through these very hard situations. SERV has a safe house that can be utilized for these dangerous situations. There are many other community serving organizations that provide services to help victims. And I would argue to the child is not only the victim, the family is the victim of situations like this. And we want you to know that help is in our community. So as we wrap up, can you just, Lizette, tell us where the Child Advocacy Center is? Can you tell us about the hours of operation? And can you tell us about possibly other services that you refer people to in the community?
So the Child Advocacy is located on 1416 East Commerce Street in Bridgeton, New Jersey. We have a hotline number that you can call. It's open 24/7. There's English and Spanish staff available. The Child Advocacy Center provides counseling services, connection to vital resources to children and teens who have experienced trauma, their families, as their case moves throughout the medical legal systems. You will be provided an advocate that's going to help you again throughout the whole process, whether it's medical or legal accompaniments, connection to community resources, and case management. And as well, with Jackie being there, we will be receiving counseling for their child.
And I just want to add that Lizette does a lot more than just those things. Lizette, as an advocate, she helps people with housing, because very often when there's a disclosure, there's changes in family structure. Lizette helps people connect to resources in the community, helps them fill out forms for housing. The advocates, Lizette, will do help people sometimes fill out the VCCO form, which is the Victims of Crime Compensation, something or the other.
VCC, yeah, it's violent. It's Victims of Crime Compensation Office. So that's a function of the prosecutor's office. We do have victim witness advocates that can help family. And I try to explain to people like the VCCO is like an insurance.
Yeah.
So if you're a victim of a crime, and it's not just sexual abuse, it could be any crime, there's compensation that defendants pay into as a part of their fines and penalties, which then has this pot of money that can help with funeral expenses. It can help with counseling expenses. It could, in theory, help with, if a family had to move and get a new place, things of that nature. So there are advocates that can help with that. And I'm sure that Lizette works with our Office of Victim Witness Advocacy to make sure that people that are going to the Child Advocacy Center have those services available to them if we're prosecuting a crime.
I do want to add that I think something important, especially for the Hispanic community, I've seen a lot in some of those services that I do refer is when it has to do with immigration. Once their daughter or the cases that I've had where they disclosed and they're getting the services, the actual parent gets fear or scared that, they're gonna come take my daughter, I'm gonna be deported back to Mexico or wherever they are from. And that's not what happens. We actually have immigration lawyer that works with us with SERV, and we provide that services to help let that fear go down and let them know that they're not in trouble, that nothing's going to happen to them, that, that we'll be there to support them, whatever their legal case may be, that the immigration lawyer will try to help them throughout the process. with the legal stuff.
So I can add in there that, you know, all police officers are aware of the Immigrant Trust Directive that the AG has directed all of us in law enforcement to act under. If you are a victim of a crime, we are not concerned with your immigration status. We do not want people to not come forward because they're fearful that they may be deported or there will be consequences for being here as an undocumented. And the reason that's important for us to be able to get that out in the community is that when people are fearful of coming forward, they are much more susceptible to victimization in all realms, not just sexual abuse. It would be being, you know, a victim of robbery, being a victim of other types of crimes. So for anyone who's listening, I want you to know that we take that very seriously. If you are a victim or a witness to a crime, police officers will not ask you about your immigration status. It does not matter to us. I do not want anyone in my community to suffer in silence because they're fearful that they may be deported. So we want you to come forward and we want you to report if anything untoward happened or you were asked about your status, because we take it very seriously and we don't want people to live in fear.
Thank you.
Okay.
So is the number that people can people call the SERV hotline if they want to talk to someone before reporting?
Yes, they can call the hotline number. Going back to like when actually reporting after there was a disclose, sometimes parents do paralyze, they don't know what to do. You can call the hotline number and we'll guide you through the process.
And is that number the 1-866-295-SERV, which is 7378?
Yes, or you could call the 1-800-225-0196. We actually merge our counties with SERV, have merged together. So there will be somebody that's going to pick up the phone, whether it's Cumberland, Gloucester, or any other county. We're now working together. So
wonderful, wonderful. I'm happy to hear that. So as we often do when we do coping with COVID, we're going to put in the comments once this airs on our YouTube channel and also Facebook, the number for the SERV hotline. And we also will put the number to the New Jersey Coalition to End Domestic Violence. It's important for people to know that oftentimes sexual violence goes along with family violence. There's always power structures and things going on in a family. So they oftentimes go hand in hand. And we want people to understand that even though it's difficult when we go through a situation like this, there are people out here like Lizette, like Jackie, like Matt, like me, who are constantly thinking of solutions to make the impact of crime and inappropriate behavior lessen it for our victims. So we are here to help you, and we want to encourage you to put safety of children first, put the safety of the most vulnerable first, so that we can help our young people grow up to be safe, healthy, community participating adults. I think that's a way of saying it. So I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you coming forward to talk about these topics. What I'm most appreciative of is that our public gets to see that there are two committed people in our community that are helping our children and families through very difficult times. And I'm here because I'm a witness to tell you that there are many, many more advocates at SERV, like Lizette, like Jackie, that are committed to helping families and children in Cumberland County. So I want to say thank you for your time and thank you for the wise advice that you've given us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.